RealAgriculture.com's presentation of Unlocking Innovation, a national call to action, is brought to you by Bioenterprise Canada. Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture, and welcome to episode 5 as we dig into the thoughts and issues that entrepreneurs face around the idea of resources and support in the agri-food and ag tech ecosystem. Joining us as always, Dave Smardon, CEO of Bioenterprise. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Shaun. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. There's some cool stuff here because we're bringing this all together. You know, we focused on some of the funding and some of the impacts on the broader, why innovation is so critical. But without entrepreneurs, it's hard to have innovation. So that's where we're really going to focus in today. Our two panelists joining us here today: Joelle Foster, who's with North Forge, which is an accelerator in Manitoba. How are you doing today, Joelle?
Good, thank you.
Also, Kim Haakstad, who is with the BC Council of Forest Industries and is formerly an executive with Terra Mera. How are we doing today, Kim?
Good. Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Okay, I'm looking forward to this discussion. There's a lot of stuff to think about, break down, and provide some clarity around. And I guess if we look at the ecosystem, the entrepreneurs trying to navigate it and some of the support gaps that were identified in that Bioenterprise report. Dave, the report highlights that entrepreneurs face a who do I call kind of challenge here when seeking support. What would a truly effective national roadmap for agri-food innovators really look like, Dave?
Well, you can probably appreciate that, we have 10 provinces and some territories, and in each of those areas we have lots of incubators and accelerators. And so we have a fragmented ecosystem. And many of us don't know what services are available, what resources are available. And entrepreneurs certainly don't know that. And so, if I'm looking for a regulatory expert, where do I go? Is there one in Manitoba that I should be in contact with, or is the best one in New Brunswick? And it goes right down the ecosystem, from entrepreneurs to ecosystem players like incubators and accelerators, to researchers who are in the research community at universities and community colleges. There is no mechanism whereby I can go online digitally and say, I'm looking for this. And up pop 4 or 5 opportunities that I can contact and say, okay, and now I know where I can go. I've just saved myself 2 weeks or longer in trying to figure out where I should go and who's got the right resources for me. So, ultimately, we'd like to have something that is more digitally oriented, that anyone can go into the system and get what they want readily.
Now, Joelle, you're working with entrepreneurs all the time at the accelerator at North Forge. How have you tried to assist in helping entrepreneurs with some of these navigation issues and misses?
So we're an incubator and accelerator. So what we try to do is, or what we are doing is, it's almost like a concierge intake, where there's one application. So you comes into North Forge, and then the team looks at it, because we have one of 4 streams in our founders program. So it's right from ideation all the way up to, raising $5 million. But we also have programming that is for Elevate IP. We have for WeLab, Women in Innovation, and our Advanced Manufacturing Lab, because we run one of the largest fabrication labs actually in North America. So there are so many different doors, but because we're trying not to be everything to everyone, but because we have this unique offering, and then ag founders as well, it's all around the partnerships as well. So like Emily has a smart farm here in Manitoba. If we can't help them, it's trying to work with different partners. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and it's really trying to just, in some cases, just provide those introductions.
Yes.
To help those people find the right path. Kim, you've been on the entrepreneur side yourself. How big of a difficulty is this?
Well, when you think about, where do entrepreneurs in agriculture or any sector come from? They come from working in the industry, or they come from academia. But rarely are they already entrepreneurs. So they don't necessarily know how to run a business, and they don't necessarily know what an accelerator and incubator is. Like, where are the places where I can go get help? There are probably people who have been thinking much more about problem solving for a particular, barrier or an area where there's an opportunity for innovation, but they haven't been thinking about how do I connect with people who can help me assess product market fit and develop my product into something that's a commercially viable solution. So they need help sort of on those earliest stages of navigation to even understand what the suite of opportunities and services are out there for them.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is trying to learn from some of the mistakes of others too, right? And I think
Yeah,
for a lot of innovators, they know where they are at point A, and they know they want to get all the way to Z, but there's a whole bunch of steps in the middle where they really need that, almost like that GPS, right?
exactly.
To guide them. And there's no right single way of doing it, but it's just even identifying the options, right? Right, Kim?
Yeah, totally. And speaking a language that people who are problem solvers and academics understand versus people who have spent a long time in the industry or in technology development, because they're not usually coming from that.
Now, Kim, you said something a little bit prior here where you said, sometimes the entrepreneur does, they have an idea, they have a product, they have some IP, but they don't really know how to run a business. And so that was another thing that we identified throughout these roundtables across the country is the skill development gap and even that mentorship gap to provide that sort of assistance. But which skills do you think are the most lacking in this community, Kim?
Well, I think what I saw was folks that really truly understand product market fit and then how to make sure that you're able to not just explain what your product is, but what it does. What problem does it solve for your potential customers? And so there's that, market development, product management key skill gap. Like as you say, Shaun, how do you go from A to Z? All the steps in between. You need people who understand that steps. That's also finance professionals, right? You need a good CFO or a fractional finance person who can keep you grounded. And, you also have to really understand like who are you selling into what. I have a friend who's actually she's in a clean tech mining company. She often talks about the fact that she feels like she's selling candles, light bulbs to candle makers, right? So when you're actually selling something to an entrenched developed industry and yours is something very very new, how do you communicate how to get from where you are today to the future vision that you see? And you need people inside and around you as advisors or as first hires that help you fill that picture in.
Joelle, how do accelerators and incubators balance some of the technical training with executive level skill development so that somebody actually knows how to actually run a business?
So it's interesting, everyone thinks that the people that we're working with over 100 founders right now. 85% have no background in tech whatsoever. They are graduates of arts, engineering, nursing. Some haven't even gone to university. So that right away we tell people, because a lot of people don't even self-identify as, well, I want to create something in the ag industry or somewhere else, but I don't have that experience, so I'm not going to do it. So we got to get rid of that right away. That's why a lot of incubators, that's why a lot of people do, starting from ideation is really important. What Kim said is that market fit. Just because your mom says it's a good idea doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea. So what we do and what other incubators do is, it is master classes, it's programming, it's training. But when you get into the incubator stage, that's where we bring in entrepreneurs in residence, industry experts, mentors, because that's where you need that help. Some of our founders, our youngest is 13 right now. I mean, I know,
That's
and our
awesome.
oldest is in his 70s. Yes, we
Also
don't
great.
discriminate against age. What's he going to know about HR and hiring a team when he hits 18? So we've got to surround them with trusted advisors. I'm sure the rest of you have seen that there is a lot of people in the different ecosystems and provinces who will say, give me $5,000 and this is what I'll do for you. We have to protect them and give them the right resources at the right time, because you can't just front load it and say, this is what you need to do, because that's overwhelming.
Yeah. And Dave, a part of this is not just the skills, but I also mentioned the word mentorship. And sometimes the innovator is lucky enough to have natural mentors that maybe they've met along the way, or maybe it's somebody that they've connected with. But what about scalable mentorship frameworks? Is mentorship scalable, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Similar to what Joelle was saying, when someone comes into our offices with an idea or with a technology, and we're going to assess it. We're going to say, is this something is there a need here? Is there a pain point? And depending on how mature that business is or how immature that business is, we're gonna put them in touch with a certain type of mentor. It'll be someone who's experienced in their sector, but it's also going to be someone who can help them with what keeps them awake at night right now. And what keeps them awake at night today is not going to be the same thing that keeps them awake at night 6 months from now. So those mentors can change over a period of time as their requirements change. And that's part of the process that's worked for us in that when you have a relationship with an entrepreneur, that relationship is not just a few weeks. That relationship can be several years. And so we have to be in a position, a patient position, to be able to move that entrepreneur steadily along the commercialization path until such time as that product or technology can be commercialized and adopted into the industry and sold.
So what makes a good mentor then? Like what like like it's easy to say, yeah, I'm a mentor to these people. You could be a crap one too, right? Like, so how do I make sure that I'm accessing not just a mentor, but a good mentor that's actually helping me and not a disservice?
Well, I think that comes back to the process that Joelle would go through and that we would go through in other incubators and accelerators. You don't just advertise for a mentor and just shove them in there and say, hey, where you go, have fun. There's an assessment process that has to take place to make sure that the mentor has come from the right sector, has the right level of experience, but also has that personality and that culture that they want to give back. And whether the mentor is working as a volunteer or whether he or she is being paid a small amount of money, you're never going to get rich being a mentor. You're being a mentor because you're getting kicks out of watching how an entrepreneur is going to grow under your tutelage. And
Yeah.
so those are the kind of things that we have to do as incubators and accelerators is make sure we have the best mentors available.
Joelle, do you have a thought on that at all?
Yeah, exactly. Dave said it really well. We go a little bit, and I shouldn't say we go further because Dave, you probably do this as well, as it's a code of conduct
Yes.
that they have to sign. And it's really understanding their why are they doing this? Because we've had some mentors that we've had to let go because they're doing it for their sales pipeline. And we want to make sure that people are aligned with our mission and they're aligned with the community that they're working with. But the other thing too is a good mentor doesn't fix things, doesn't tell you what to do. They listen and they help you to understand what that looks like. So I always encourage people, if you want to be a mentor, actually take some courses online because I you learn a lot about yourself,
Mhm.
but it's like parenting. You don't your kids don't get too far if you tell them what to do. You just got put that, the little carrot and make them see that that's what they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a good mentor asks good questions, right?
Yes.
That there's a little bit of a
Yeah.
difference there in the approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the other things we heard from entrepreneurs throughout the roundtables was the the identification of value of things like smart farms and some, the ability to connect with actual farmers and do some testing. But there are barriers in place to be able to make that actually happen for a lot of entrepreneurs. And there's a bit of a maybe a bit of a difference here between if you grew up in the industry of agriculture versus you did versus you didn't. Entrepreneurs often say smart farms are too costly, they're difficult to access. Dave, what funding or structural changes would make them more accessible for early stage innovators in this sector?
Well, Todd Orman had a lot to say on this topic because he's with Old College and they have a smart farm there. One of the structural issues that we have is that the smart farms get funded, but their overheads and their personnel are not funded. through that. So that means that they have to put forward a revenue generating model that charges companies for that overhead and for the use of their systems. And depending on the maturity of the company, many of them cannot afford that. If you are a startup and you have no revenues yet, and you're working with North Forge or Bioenterprise or some other organization in Canada, every nickel is so important to you. And the government does not pay for you to go through the smart farm. Now, there are some organizations that are really pushing smart farms, like Kane in Alberta. But again, the model is fraught because there isn't that subsidy for the early stage companies to engage with the smart farms to say, okay, we're gonna do this work. It's gonna cost $100,000, and me as an entrepreneur, I can give you 10 to 25 of that, but that's as much as I can give you, right?
It's kind of like it's a really important step here in the commercialization process, because it's a little bit of the rubber hitting the road. So we've got a really good product, and we've done some prototyping and some testing, or I'm making up an example, but it's when we actually see it in not just like a little plot, but on a little bit of a larger scale in a testing environment. This could be the difference between success or failure. Kim, how important in your mind is access to on-farm testing and validation and convincing investors to back agri-food companies? So there's the farmer part of it, but there's also the proof. Proof is in the pudding. We put it through its paces here at a smart farm, and we were successful or not.
Yeah, and I think it's really thinking about mapping your technology development cycle, or where you are against technology readiness levels, right? And so you want to get out and do that testing, but you need to do it at the right time. So if you map your technology development timelines to the technology readiness levels that also government funders tend to use to determine whether or not you qualify for their programs, is that you're hard on yourself at each stage gate when you decide to move from level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3, and up to the higher levels where you're getting into piloting, you're getting into on farm or in real environment testing, right? So don't do it too soon. If your lab conditions will give you good information, but don't do it too late either, because if your lab condition results don't translate into on-field application, then you'll fail way too late, and you will have invested too much money, or you could be in a debt position where you can't afford to restructure. So it is really having that discipline, and I think that's where organizations like Bioenterprise and North Forge come in, to understand when the right time to make that on-farm testing investment is. And the great part about a smart farm is you can do it on a smaller scale before you have to go to big commercial production, where it is even more expensive. So that interim step can be really, really helpful in proving that viability, getting you to the next level of investment, or getting you to qualify for another non-dilutive funding program to help support your development as a project. But map it to levels and be hard on yourself when you decide that you're graduated and ready. Don't get too soon, and don't wait too long. It's a tough decision, but it's important.
That's interesting, because there's like a sweet spot. So, Joelle, how do we know the sweet spot? When do we don't be too, like Kim just said, don't be too early, don't be too late. So we're trying to thread the needle here, so to speak. How do we identify that?
I don't, if you can figure out how to identify that sweet spot, then you're going to make a lot of money. It's hard. I mean, that's why organizations like this exist, because you can't do it alone. And it's about collaboration, which is extremely important. And I think that the US sometimes is ahead of us because they work together as a country in some aspects, but we provincially, it's very difficult. It's Manitoba. Is it Manitoba versus Alberta, or Saskatchewan versus BC? And we should be working together, and there should be a central place where Dave and myself and you and Kim, that we're all helping right across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Dave, what was the saying? It's a country of 11 countries or something.
Yeah, we operate as if we're 13 different countries.
13 different countries.
I know.
But
that's,
right?
Yeah.
But that is our weakness. This is why I think it has stalled us in many areas. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing when you've got provinces that are talking about leaving Canada. Like there's other things that are more important right now than you know fiefdoms,
Yeah.
Yeah.
collaboration.
Well, is that ever important? You know, back when we were starting this conversation, Shaun, I think Joelle was the one that was talking about, ideation and cohorts. And what would be really nice is for us to have a system in place where we know which companies are going through the ideation process. And when they complete that ideation process, we now know where they're headed next. And it could be to North Forge's next round of cohorts with some mentorship and so on. And then there's an opportunity to reach out to some very specific resources that a company may need that Joelle's going, I don't think I have anybody here in Winnipeg that can do that, but
Right.
there's
Yeah.
somebody in Edmonton that I can, if I can just get the person in Edmonton involved with this. And so we're tracking that company all the way along, bringing resources in. And yes, it's being managed as a Manitoba company. It is a Manitoba company, and that's really important. But ultimately, you want that to be a Canadian success story.
Well,
And
And
so,
they need customers in other provinces. We're not big
Yeah.
enough.
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
that is very true. And we saw different attitudes across the different provinces on that, Joelle, to be honest with you. Like some like it was that part was kind of fascinating to see some of the differences across the country. But I think one of the other results of this fragmentation is what we also heard a lot is being critical. We have companies that are professional accelerators. They're kind of stuck in this stage for way too long, bouncing kind of from institution to institution, and because of the lack of coordination, and it's not collusion, it's just the lack of like we're not getting from start to finish or start to failure in this case quick enough to say, you know what, this you kind of done your thing. This is going nowhere. Maybe let's idea number two. Let's start over. And Kim, you are really nodding there, so go ahead.
Well, because I think this is so Canadian, right? It's a very Canadian conversation where we have something to help everybody. And sometimes we actually have to think about how to pick winners and losers. And we actually have to give the hard message to entrepreneurs. You don't have the product market fit, or you're not ready to move to the next stage, right? And we build programs where I'm on the board of the digital supercluster, and most people in agriculture will be more familiar with the Proteins Industries Canada, or PIC, right? Those are organizations that the federal government gave one to each region and sort of said, okay, agriculture, you're in Saskatchewan, digital technology, you're in BC, oceans, you're in the East. But all of us have the opportunity and should work all across the country, but only on the best, most viable technology where we know that there is product market fit, because you build consortiums that include customers as part of the projects to make sure that what the government funding is using is developed in partnership with either a consortium or a single customer that is going to help you bring that product to market and test it as you go through all the different stages. But sometimes at Canada, we want to give a little bit to everybody instead of deeply investing in the most promising technology. And we have to really think about that. I think sometimes that's why we're falling behind other jurisdictions, even when we're often ahead or the first to develop a certain type of technology, is because we want to help everybody that's got an idea, instead of saying, this is the best, this is what we need the most, this moves the dial on addressing, what we were talking about when I was at Terramera, climate change as it confronts farmers. We need different solutions to help support them in a wildly different set of climate circumstances. And that's important. But, we have to understand who's got the wherewithal to actually deliver, and not feel like everybody should be in every program.
Yeah, the spread the peanut butter. And Joelle, you're clapping. This is the first episode we've actually had some applause. So what why
Well, because I'm
why
I'm
we
thinking here we're starting a new program right now, right? All four of us, we're going to now move ahead and do something about this. You seem to be all doers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but
Okay, so you heard it first here, Shaun.
So,
that is,
John,
that is the idea. Go ahead, Dave.
if I can use a golf analogy here, right? So the tee box is the incubator and the accelerator, and with the entrepreneur, and the goal is to be where the pin is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it's a straight line from the tee box to the pin. But the entrepreneurs are playing what we call left-right golf. They're off into the woods on the left-hand side, then they go off to the right-hand side, then they hit a couple of bad shots, and they don't get to that hole anywhere near where they could have. And you could save so much time if Joelle and I and Kim and others said, okay, here's the tee box and there's the hole. Let's go and work together to make it happen.
Yeah, and the fastest way to the green is
Yep,
like following the fairway, right? And,
exactly.
and so that's a great segue to kind of like we've talked about the fragmentation and the lack of clarity on the roadmap from the aspect of maybe we're not picking winners enough, and it's we're bogged down where everybody has an idea that you can be an innovator too, but it also for the really good ideas it slows down the velocity of getting them to commercialization. It really like it's an impediment where we and that's the other thing that our current context or framework has created is we're kind of running in quicksand or we're stuck in the bunker just trying to run as fast as we possibly can. And Kim, I'm seeing you nod there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the challenges that I run the non-dilutive funding programs, so I not only helped us find the funding but deliver on them. And you were in this constant state of nothing was moving at the speed of your business, right? So you had some government programs that have one or two intakes a year. They're never seasonal with agriculture, or they're not seasonal with your business, one or the other, sometimes both, right? So, that didn't always make sense if you could, get it funding for a summer student, but you really needed the work in the spring when things are most intense in agriculture, right? Or you have, government programs that ask you to enter into a 2 or 3 year process and predict the future. And then it's really hard to change your milestone success criteria, even sometimes when you're actually even when you're actually doing better than what you thought you would be. And what I found is usually in some respects we were ahead of schedule and in some respects we were behind schedule. But the government programs were built in a way that they were very rigid. You had to go through a complex amendment process for something you wrote 2.5 years ago. Often it takes 6 or 8 months for a government funding program to be approved. And like you've got, ideally you've got 24 months of capital if you're pre-revenue, but most companies are not living with that anymore. 6, 12 months capital, you feel pretty good, but you're also trying to figure out how to navigate within a system that looks at government fiscal years and quarterly business timelines where your business runs on a very different, that's for established companies. That's great. But for tech startups, that can be really, really tough.
Dave, something else we heard a lot about through the roundtables that something needs to be done about, and maybe it's a bit of a culture shift here, is we heard the phrase "country of pilot projects." What would a clear commercialization roadmap kind of look like here, Dave?
There's a good question. I have to give this one a little bit of thought. I mean, we have looked at what it would take to put together a digital roadmap for a company,
Mm-hmm.
and also to make sure that roadmap is populated with resources where we understand what each organization is best at. So everybody does a bit of mentorship, everybody does a bit of business planning and so on, but ultimately there's usually a handful of things that your organization is exemplary at, and that's what we want to know. Because for the entrepreneurs, they can get a lot of stuff done locally, but when it needs that exemplary piece of work, they could go to that digital service. The other thing is, though, I believe anyway, that there is an opportunity for a coordinating service, so that there are a lot of government monies that come out from the government, and as we said earlier, they spread them around like peanut butter. There needs to be a little more of a strategic process here as to where those monies go and how much an organization gets. When you spread it around, as we've said, what happens is no one has a critical mass of dollars to run a series of programs, nor do they have a critical mass to bring in all the kind of expertise they need. And it's not that we all want to be 100 man, not for profits, but you want to have enough money to be able to take those companies that are really showing potential success. Cherry pick the ones, as you say, select them. And one of the problems we all run into, and I'm sure Joelle probably has a similar problem, is when we have to report to the government that just gave us money, we have to report on volumes of business that we've helped.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying, you know what, we saw 100 companies, but we're only helping five, because those five are the ones that have the greatest potential for being impactful to Canadian agriculture. So that's a cultural issue that we have within government, to say, let's stop with the volume and if Bioenterprise and North Forge picked five companies and said, we're just going to do those five companies and together we're going to work on them, we'd have success.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should do that, Dave.
Yeah.
It seems like Joelle, it seems like it's the wrong KPI. We're judging ourselves based on the wrong metric, and it's what that is doing is creating a system and forcing behavior to try to achieve those KPIs when we know. Well, we heard this throughout these roundtables. This volume metric idea, it's creating bad behavior in the long run, and you're being rewarded in a sense. I don't blame you, because you're being rewarded for it, because that's the metric that you're given, Joelle.
Yeah, and there are a number of organizations that I've worked for before where you feel like you've got to pump out, and then did we have the best interest of every entrepreneur in mind? But you want that continued funding, so it's just trying to balance. And at the end of the day, I like what Dave's saying, like pick five companies and turn them into, instead of unicorns, prairie corns, and help them. But because we can only do so much here in Manitoba, I need the help of those in Ontario and Saskatchewan and Alberta, because there are specialties, as you said, Shaun, that each province has. And I don't think that any founder should work with just one incubator accelerator. I think that they should be working with multiple.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a way to go back to what I said about how companies need to map where they are in the technology readiness level and really focus in on that and understanding, Dave, as you were talking about having that map, a map of who is the best to support you when you are in the earliest stages and when you are at commercialization, right? And then measure against metrics that are the right fit for the part of the technology development cycle you're in. So is it about your seed series or series A attracting that investment? Then it's about IP and IP registration held in Canada. Then it's about, actually getting pilots in place with real customers, or, getting proof of concepts done that actually show that you have an opportunity to commercialize. At each stage, you need different kinds of skill sets and experiences to support you as a company. So if we could map those services against the way that the business is thinking about their technology development commercialization cycle, that would be a good way to help, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It
Dave?
would, and it'll be about shared assets and services as well. Everybody only gets so much money, but if we specialize in one couple areas, just think of an entrepreneur is almost going from, west to east or east to west and working with people along the way. We'll call it the new ag corridor or something.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
The thrust for more collaboration is makes so much sense, and it also is a more efficient use of the dollars, because you have less overlap, and so then we're not only more nimble, we're more specialized, and we're more efficient with the dollars, which all kind of adds up to a better result at the end of the day. We just got to be, but it takes a change in the mindset, because we've been kind of ingrained for a number of years in doing it the way that we currently are. So I guess one of the stakeholders here, of course, is government. So Dave, we'll start with you. If you could recommend one immediate policy change to improve resources and support for agri-food entrepreneurs, what would it be, Dave?
First thing I would do is I would add innovation into the priority list in Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So currently, they invest a ton of dough into research, and that's pre-commercialization research. When it comes to the commercialization and adoption process, they invest very, very little. And so there's a gap that gets left. And if I go back in time when Trudeau was in power, what he did was he took innovation away from agriculture and he gave it to Industry, Science and Economic Development Canada, known as ISET. And so organizations like ours had to go to the government, but we couldn't get the money we needed from Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada because they said, that's innovation, go here. And you went to the innovation group and they said, yeah, but we really don't do agriculture. You need to go back over there. So there needs to be this greater government focus. And it's not just our industry. Every industry has this problem where government is not paying enough attention to the commercialization and adoption of high impact innovations.
Joelle, what would be your recommendation?
Procurement as a first customer.
Hmm.
We've got too many pilots die, too many companies get scooped by other countries because Canada is not the first customer. It needs to be done provincially as well as federally. We keep talking about it, but nobody steps up and is actually the first customer. And it's really frustrating.
Hear, hear.
Kim?
Well, I think it is actually to get folks outside of Ottawa or whatever city that they operate in and actually on the ground working with entrepreneurs in the area and successful understanding what makes success in agriculture innovation, right? And so that's talking to organizations like Norfolk Forge and Bioenterprise and to their successful companies that have moved through the process and utilizing them to help input what your new policies and programs should be. And then I can't help but mention again the map your funding programs and deadlines and timelines to the realities of the sector that you're supporting. And so for agriculture, we need to do some work in the winter so we're ready for the spring so that we can test through the growing season. It's very obvious in Canada what our growing seasons are. And so, work through that to make sure that programs match the timelines that the industry actually needs in order to, we can only test usually in the summer, right? And so if you're not testing indoors, then you've got to have programs that match those timelines.
Well said.
Yeah, great stuff. I think there's something in there for, entrepreneurial skill development, building more of an entrepreneurial culture in Canada and really trying to foster that through skill development and attitude, but also regulatory barriers in certain segments of the industry.
Yes.
That's a big factor as well, because you just can't say, what, we're going to create innovation and we're like outcome focused. Like we're going to, Canada's going to be a place for entrepreneurs to do business. And it's, that's where it kind of ends. And you just sort of make the statement and it's just going to happen. You need to kind of create that process and that culture of that. So I think there's definitely a lot to this. Has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for participating today in this episode from an entrepreneur's perspective. Really appreciate it. Joel, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Nice seeing everyone.
Yeah, you too, Kim.
You as well.
Thanks so much, Shaun and Dave. Great to be here.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks a lot. Please check out episode 6 coming out soon.
And then stay tuned for an announcement because all of us are going to form a group and do something that we just talked about.
Absolutely.
There you go.
We're all doers.
That's what we need. More groups. Cheers, everybody.